York City, sending 4,500 migrants back to Texas.
Incoming border czar spoke to Texas National Guard soldiers and public safety troopers on the border today.
Just a few weeks following Trump's re-election, the state of Texas has just sent 45,000 migrants on an all-expenses-paid bus trip to the gates of New York City. This was a drastic move by Governor Greg Abbot, aimed at reducing tensions at the southern borders.
Of the largest border state, the great state of Texas.
This decision became the subject of controversy, leading to a heated exchange between the governor of Texas and the mayor of New York. Shocking accusations and occasional insults flew back and forth, making people wonder. Why was Governor Abbot willing to go this far? And what could be the implications of this bold action? Join us as we unveil all the details behind this mass exodus to New York. Mass deportations, conflicts, and tensions. Texas Governor Greg Abbot has always been known for his overly practical approach to handling difficult situations. Now taking the bull by the horns, he has now sent 45,000 migrants from the southern U.S. border to New York City. This drastic action is part of Operation Lone Star, a program put up to reduce the ever-increasing pressure on the various towns located along the border. These places have been the target of many migrants that have allegedly been up to no good, with many stories of crimes ranging from the common to the absurd. From the many exposed cases of drug trafficking at the borders to the famous TikTok meme of Donald Trump accusing immigrants of eating the cats.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating...
It was clear to everyone that the border wasn't a nice place. In defense of this drastic action, Governor Abbot argues that the Biden administration hasn't done enough to manage the crises at the borders, leaving the individual states down the coastline to handle the issues on their own. With places like Texas having no support from the government and left to deal with the crisis by themselves, Governor Abbot has taken the imperative by sending a huge chunk of migrants to sanctuary states like New York. By placing increasing pressure on places that are more open to migrants, Governor Abbot believes he and other leaders at the state level can finally get the much-needed attention they've been needing for years.
We're getting no support on this national crisis.
In response, New York City Mayor Eric Adams has openly spoken out against Greg Adams, calling his actions morally bankrupt and accusing him of using helpless migrants as political pawns for pushing Republican propaganda. While talking about this, Mayor Eric reported that over 120,000 immigrants in total have arrived in New York City ever since Governor Greg had begun sending people to his city for asylum. The mayor stressed that the resources available for the migrants in the city were already stretched thin, and bringing in more migrants was only making things worse. The tensions between both states only got worse because of this, with all subsequent heated exchanges and controversies tracing back to this drastic action. And without a proper response from the federal government, both sides continue to heap insults and accusations at each other, and with inside reports telling us New York City plans on sending another batch of migrants back to Texas, it's safe to say the conflict isn't ending anytime soon. Given the circumstances, it seems both sides have a lot to complain about, as the situation is far more complicated than what it looks like on the surface. Though the conflict has drawn a lot of attention on a national scale, it seems the current administration isn't interested in addressing the situation. While New York City has been known as a sanctuary for migrants, it turns out they cannot cater to the thousands of people now flocking at the borders. Many point this out as a failure to live up to the promises made in the past. But there is more to this than meets the eye. Here is what we mean. New York and the migrants. For over 2 years, New York City has been struggling with taking care of over 200,000 immigrants. The never-ending influx of migrants has left scars on the city's economy, with 60,000 of these visitors living in shelters funded by taxpayer money. Mayor Eric has pulled no punches in talking about the dire nature of the situation, stating that the problem could be the downfall of New York City. Many efforts have been made to solve the crisis, including building more than 200 emergency shelters with an accumulated cost of over $2 billion. Despite these efforts, the city remains overwhelmed, with the only help given by the Biden administration being the launch of specialized software to make work at the borders faster and easier. Among these few provisions was the much-dreaded ICE portal, an application that was plagued with many issues from the day it was launched on various platforms. Though it was built to help the massively understaffed Border Patrol officials and agents at the borders, many saw it as a way of counteracting Donald Trump's frightening promises against illegal immigration. After several weeks of anticipation, the app rolled out in New York City, where tens of thousands of migrants were waiting to be processed through the new security protocol. Sadly, the app was plagued with many bugs and glitches, especially on Android phones and laptops. It seemed the app was first built strictly for Apple before being ported to other platforms without proper optimization, and with the app failing to collect GPS location data on time, the agents had less information on the whereabouts of migrants shortly after they got in. It also didn't help that the app had no features aimed at checking for past arrests and outstanding warrants, making it possible to bring in notorious migrants with the longest criminal records. With these many exploits found in the software, many migrants found ways of maneuvering the protocols, easily evading the authorities and getting in without proper authentication. Even among the migrants who got in legally, the app still had lots of issues, with many complaining about the unintuitive design and how difficult it was to use. Others reported the app didn't work in certain regions, making the software look more like a gimmick than something worth using. Many immigration officers spoke out on this, including Ed Kucha, a famous attorney from the Kucha law firm. He argued that based on his client's experience, the app was no better than the previous system, which he insisted was much better than whatever this app was. To make up for this failure, the mayor launched multiple initiatives to connect legal migrants to promising job opportunities, with one of the programs costing over $600 million to get off the ground. It promised to prepare 250 million young people for the workforce in a matter of months, but due to many legal restrictions, it turned out to be another massive waste of taxpayer funds. A closer look indicates a vast majority of migrants failed to meet the legal requirements of getting a job, with long legal processes taking almost a year. At the time, most of the shelters offered 60 days for migrants to find lodging in other places. If they failed to do so, they would be evicted from all shelters and possibly sent back to the borders. With only 60 days of accommodation for a year-long process required to get a working pass, the system just wasn't practical for most migrants seeking to make a living over relying on the government to do everything for them. For most migrants seeking asylum at this point, it became a matter of picking a poison. And for most people, it was either suffering in poverty and uncertainty about starting a new life in America or staying back in their home country to accept their tragic fate. As expected, the answer for the majority was the former. And with the average asylum request taking over 6 months to reach court, the number of these cases only increases as time goes on. New York City's failure to live up to its reputation of being a haven for migrants is a prime example of biting more than you can chew. And with the federal government mostly keeping silent on the issue, there seems to be no hope on the horizon for the once beloved city. Texas, on the other hand, is a slightly different case, as we shall see. Texas and the immigrants. On the surface, it seems like New York is the only state going through major problems with migrants in recent years, especially when compared with the state of Texas. But don't let the headlines fool you. Texas has also been facing a massive influx of immigrants, with most of them occurring at the southern border. The biggest region along the coastline is the famous Rio Grande Valley sector, a place known for being the busiest immigrant section in the country. This fact alone shreds all doubts about the ongoing border crisis in the state, forcing the governor to send migrants to various places known for taking better care of migrants, including the beloved New York City. This was most evident with the launch of a very controversial operation funded by the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas Military Department. This was Operation Lone Star, a program that came about due to the government's alleged ignorance of the worsening situation. Border Patrol agents have been struggling with their jobs, with many staffers quitting just months after getting hired. The dreaded pandemic didn't help with this either, as they had to keep at their jobs even with the disease dreading at a rapid rate. Many agents fell sick at the time, and the ones who remained strong worked 12-hour shifts but still struggled to keep up with the increasing number of migrants. As expected, sooner or later, the situation began to take a toll on the agents, with one of them talking about how the job always gnawed at his conscience. He talked about various moments when he had to stop multiple migrants who had sincere reasons for wanting to come in, including those who sought protection within the country's borders. Sometimes they had to separate families and arrest people with brute force over minor crimes like trespassing. And because of this, multiple cases of burnout surged among the agents. And over the months, many of them came to hate their jobs. Despite these problems, Texas Governor Greg Abbot continues to push forward with the operation, stating it's the only thing he can do to address the border crisis. With border agents losing morale and an increasing number of crimes along the coastline, Operation Lone Star was a desperate move to make up for the absence of the federal government in addressing the situation. Over the years, the operation has been very successful in increasing border security, leading to the arrest of over 500,000 illegal immigrants and the confiscation of over 500 million doses of illegal substances. Reports indicate that Operation Lone Star has led to a 74% drop in illegal border crossings since the program kicked off in 2021. However, that didn't mean it was perfect. Multiple organizations like the Human Rights Watch and the American Civil Liberties Union released proof of unwarranted aggression by Border Patrol agents on immigrants. Most of their findings were disturbing, with reports of authorities at the borders withholding basic needs like water while pushing the migrants back into the Rio Grande on multiple occasions. Seeing agents chasing down illegal immigrants felt like a scene from a brutal action movie, with high-speed pursuits that often resulted in major injuries and even death. The American Civil Liberties Union called these actions inhumane and excessive, insisting that the operation was intentionally ignoring basic human rights in pursuit of short-term border security and a strictly conservative agenda. That aside, the operation is also known for being very expensive, costing taxpayers over $2.5 million each week. Over $10 billion was put out for the operation to remain sustainable for 2024, with many arguing that the money could have been used for other things than stopping some people from entering the country. But despite these many issues, the governor of Texas has been in support of the programs, insisting that though it isn't perfect, it has done a great job in addressing the many crimes known for occurring at the borders. Even in light of this, Texas Democrat State Representative Rafael Anchia has spoken out against the operation, implying that the Texas government was failing to see the long-term consequences while being preoccupied with the short-term success of harsh law enforcement solutions. These problems on both sides were what led to the heated exchange between the New York mayor and the Texas governor, and this is where it gets interesting. When leaders clash. Even with the immigration issues getting worse, multiple Republican-led states still keep sending thousands of immigrants to New York City. States like Texas, Arizona, and Florida have been known for doing this, with the situation getting so bad that Mayor Adams once declared a state of emergency over the issue. Of course, among all these states, Texas stands out as the biggest thorn in the mayor's side, led by the Republican governor, Greg Abbot. Their recent clashes over different ideas and drastic actions are nothing new. Now known for his very practical approach to handling issues like this, it seemed Greg Abbot was hell-bent on making the mayor of New York live out his bold promises of making his city home for everyone, including the thousands of immigrants that had arrived in Texas. Since 2022, it has been actively sending these thousands of immigrants to New York City by putting them in large buses and sponsoring their trips to the new area. Many have called this out as harsh, especially considering how the average bus trip from Texas to New York usually takes over 40 hours. Following this drastic action, the mayor of New York City called him out for doing this while knowing New York was under immense pressure from immigration. He referred to Governor Abbott's ongoing operations as more of a political stunt rather than a necessary action for the safety of the border and the good of the migrants. He believed there were better ways the governor of Texas could have addressed the issue rather than making matters worse for those in New York. In response, Governor Abbott's press secretary Renee Ease stated that his comments and accusations were not consistent with the promises he made about New York City being a welcoming sanctuary for immigrants. According to the secretary, the New York mayor acts like the city is an always open hub that is free for all immigrants, but later goes on to complain about not being able to handle the influx. The office pointed out how the 45,000 migrants sent to New York were only a fraction of what the border communities in Texas dealt with on a daily basis. Following the reports put out by the American Civil Liberties Union, the Office of the Texas Governor released a statement indicating that the immigrants chose to go on their own to New York City, and all the Texas Border Patrol did was provide the means for them to do so, addressing the allegations of gross hostility towards immigrants. The statement also claimed that those in charge of the research failed to understand the many challenges the border communities deal with regularly. Contrary to what they thought, The statement said that most of the arrested immigrants were charged with much greater crimes that hadn't been disclosed yet. With the nuances of the situation now brought into light, many thought this was when both parties would agree on the next course of action that would be most beneficial for both states. On the contrary, things only got worse from there. The back and forth between the two leaders almost got past the breaking point, with the Democrat mayor calling the Republican governor a madman. Filled with rage over Greg's ignorance, he threatened to come over to Texas to beat him in an election. He joked about sending busloads of New Yorkers to knock on the doors of citizens to rally against their leader, just so he would understand how it feels. This was a bold statement from the mayor, reflecting long moments of frustration coming out through a single public statement. In response, the governor of Texas dismissed his threats, telling him to stop hurling insults and focus instead on the Biden administration, which has allegedly failed to address the crisis. He argues that the state of Texas was going through greater chaos at the borders, stating that he only intended to bring attention to the situation by sending migrants in high numbers to the places most likely to welcome them. This made little sense to the mayor, who still insisted that Greg's recent action wasn't right. Greg stood his ground, stating he only did what was necessary for the people living at the borders. Thanks to his operation, the towns at the border are reportedly much safer and less affected by illegal immigrants known for causing chaos in their streets. With Donald Trump taking over from the Biden administration, expectations are high, as many hope the returning president focuses more on improving the immigration policies to make sure good and hardworking migrants get in, while also keeping the bad ones out. Hopefully, this would be done through a less aggressive approach than Operation Lone Star, and future programs like this would never have a reason to exist. But until President Trump takes definitive action on the ongoing crises at the borders, we just have to wait and see what the new administration has in mind for the citizens and migrants caught up in this never-ending problem. So what do you think? Will the coming administration correct the alleged mistakes of the Biden administration? Should Operation Lone Star continue to be a thing after Trump takes definitive action at the borders? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.